Good evening and welcome to another Otterbein Debates. Tonight we are looking at the question of, are we learning to be citizens? Our debaters for this evening are Labra Hernandez, who will be arguing against the question, and Jude Burnside, who will be arguing for it. Our judges tonight are two colleagues from China, Victoria Zhou and Lydia Zhou, and from the library we have Alan Reichert. Our student judges are Catherine Dodds, a junior chemistry major, and Maggie Doherty, a double English and communication major and a sophomore. Each speaker tonight will have 6 minutes to construct their speeches, followed by 2 minutes of cross-examination. And then they will have 3-minute rebuttals, followed by a 2-minute summary speech by our first speaker. Are we ready? Let's begin.
The question we are trying to answer here is, are Americans learning how to be citizens? And the answer is no. The majority of Americans do not know their constitutional rights, which is frightening. They are not involved in their political systems, for example, voting. The United States has the lowest voter turnout of all democratic countries. Americans do not want to join the military. They do not want to fight to protect their country, and the ones who do are being denied. Apart from that, we do not help each other in the ways we should, and we do not volunteer enough to say that, yes, we are learning how to be good citizens. According to Merriam-Webster Dictionary, a citizen is defined as a native or naturalized person who owes allegiance to a government and is entitled protection from it. My question to you is, how are we learning to be citizens? How can we give allegiance to a country if we don't even know the foundation of the country? Americans don't know the Constitution. According to CNN Politics, 37% of Americans cannot name a single right of the First Amendment. There are 5. According to the same article, there are only 1 in 4 Americans can name the 3 branches of government. That is, only 26% can name one of the branches of government, and yet we call ourselves citizens. Can you name them? If you didn't, it's the executive, judicial, and legislative branches. The level of civil ignorance in this country is appalling, starting with our president, Donald Trump. According to the USnews.com, even Trump cannot answer the top 3 functions of our government. We also don't participate. We don't participate in voting. There are 308 million people living in the United States, according to the Census Bureau. According to Politico.com, there are 200 million Americans that are registered to vote. According to thedailyDot.com, only 54.2% of the people who are registered to vote did vote. We also don't participate in the military. According to 5038.org, only 4% or 1.4 million Americans are active in the military. In time of war, our government has the right to draft men to fight for our country, and even if our men don't want to go and fight, they can always go to Canada to avoid the draft, just like they did during the Vietnam War. According to PureResearch.com, the highest voting turnout rates among OECD nations were in Belgium with 87.2%, Sweden with 82.6%, and Denmark with 80.3%. We don't help each other either. So it turns out in my research that we do volunteer, but is it really voluntary, or is it forced upon us? The statistics are not relevant because volunteerism is being required and being forced upon us. Even if we do volunteer, so it's being forced upon us. Most high schools require students to do service hours for them to be required to graduate, and that's not exactly us being volunteered to do it. We do it so that we can graduate. And even if we do volunteer, we should be doing it out of the will of human beings. So, and again, volunteering doesn't equate to us being a citizen. We have districts that are U.S. territories like Puerto Rico and the District of Columbia. People are considered citizens, but they do not have representation from the government. The U.S. is meant to help them, but look at what happened in Puerto Rico. The hurricanes that occurred there and how long it took for the U.S. to help them get resources. Even then, it wasn't what they needed. When there's a draft, we can draft people from those countries, like we did during the Vietnam War. People in Puerto Rico and the District of Columbia are allowed to vote, but their vote does not count as part of the Electoral College. So if you want to lose your rights, you can always go to one of the U.S. territories or the District of Columbia. So we are not learning how to be citizens. At Otterbein, there is no general ed requirement for us to further expand our knowledge on how to be citizens. We need to educate people to be better citizens, which is why I propose that we should have a general education requirement for civil learning. In that course, it being taught American government and the Constitution, about a broad spectrum of it to help further engage us with being and learning how to be a good citizen. Being a citizen is the foundation of the country, and knowing its principles like the Constitution, participating in voting, or the military are important to being a citizen. Since we do not know the Constitution and since we do not participate in voting or the military, we are not learning how to be good citizens. Thank you.
I just have a few questions really quickly. Could you read your definition of citizenship again really quick for me?
It is, a citizen is defined as a native or naturalized person who owes allegiance to a government and is entitled to protection from it.
Okay, so within that definition, how would you personally define allegiance?
As giving up your right to vote, giving up your rights if needed to help protect the country, in a way, I guess.
Okay, so would you consider owing allegiance to a country to also mean paying taxes?
Yes.
Okay, what about volunteering for whatever reason?
No.
Okay.
Because, like I mentioned, we're forced to volunteer, so it's not out of the well-being of like us being humans.
Okay, even being forced to volunteer, if you're still volunteering for the country, would that be allegiance?
What do you mean by volunteering?
So like community service, serving your country like within your country, helping the people within it?
Then yes, I guess.
Okay. Okay, that's all. Thank you. Hello. Citizenship is defined as the character of an individual viewed as a member of society, behavior in terms of duties, obligations, and functions of a citizen. Under those terms, I believe that yes, we are in fact learning to be citizens. My first point in this debate is that we begin learning how to be citizens at a very young age. We're taught the Pledge of Allegiance in our earliest years of schooling, and it is repeated every morning starting in elementary school. In fact, 43 out of 50 states have laws regarding the Pledge of Allegiance in our curriculum. It is not mandatory to stand or recite the pledge, but it is taught to even our youngest citizens to ensure they know what it means to be a citizen. The second and more wholesome part of this point is the Education for Democracy Act. This is a bill that was introduced in 2001, and it was aimed to refocus civic education in public school districts. This bill had three functioning purposes: to improve the quality of civics and government education by educating students about the history and principles of Constitution of the United States, including the Bill of Rights. 2, to foster civic competence and responsibility. And 3, to improve the quality of civic education and economic education through cooperative civic education and economic education exchange programs with other democratic nations. My second point in this argument is that we are aware of the freedoms allotted to us under the Constitution, and we use our freedoms to make decisions and defend them. Protests are a major part of this point. Under the First Amendment, we as citizens are able to express our personal beliefs in politics, religion, ethics, and protests. Kneeling during the national anthem is a very current example of this. The players who participate in kneeling during the anthem are aware of their freedoms under their Constitution, and they use those freedoms to take a stand. Another example of knowing our freedoms is that we vote, and we are proud of it. Over 200 million people are registered to vote in the United States, according to Politico. This is a shocking 2/3 of the United States population. We even boast our right to vote through social media posts and I voted stickers and hashtags on campaign days. So this takes me to my third point, that our right to vote is just as much our right to not vote. We learn how our democratic system works, and we can choose to not participate in it, and it does not mean that we are less of a citizen. We can also choose to not participate in the military, in community service, and in politics. We are educated about our rights, and we are given freedoms to participate economically, socially, and politically. We can use our free times as citizens to participate in activities that allow us to grow, which may not always equate to directly serving others. There are multiple ways to serve, and part of that is just working and being a good neighbor, not punching a clock in community service hours. My final point here is that Otterbein even takes steps as a higher education institution to create a wholesome experience and well-rounded citizens. Otterbein's mission statement says, "The Division of Student Affairs at Otterbein University serves students by creating an environment that fosters holistic development and enhances the academic experience by cultivating an appreciation for lifelong learning and empowering all students to become engaged citizens." It literally says in our university mission that Otterbein works to empower and create engaged citizens. So yes, I do think we're learning to become citizens. Also at Otterbein, we have an integrative studies course requirement for all students. The integrative studies program requires Otterbein students and challenges them for the complexity of a 21st century world. It foregrounds interdisciplinary and integrative skills, competencies, and ways of knowing, and is committed to the premise that one's learning should serve and shape one's chosen responsibilities both in and to the world. I would also like to add that I don't believe we need a civic education requirement within this, as all states require high school students to have a basic understanding of the Constitution and Bill of Rights in order to graduate high school or obtain a GED. In Ohio, this is covered under the Ohio graduation test. Also, many current issues are covered in INST courses at Otterbein, meaning we would not need one class to discuss current events in the U.S., because we can already do it in 8 different courses. My last point under Otterbein is that we volunteer in our community. The mission of the Center for Community Engagement is to educate citizens to participate responsibly in a global society. Otterbein is one of 9 schools on the National Honor Roll for Community Service, with our students boasting 70,000 community service hours a year. So under these 4 points, I do believe that yes, we are learning how to be citizens through utilizing our freedoms and participating in the culture of the United States.
So you mentioned that we learn our rights in high school, correct?
Yes.
What is the point of being taught our rights if we do not retain that information?
I would say that's more on a case-by-case basis. And also, like I said, it's under our freedoms that we choose what information we do want to retain and what we do want to participate in.
But don't you think that as a citizen we should retain our rights to be good citizens?
Personally, yes. There are a lot of things I believe we should do, but I can't make other people do them.
Okay. You also mentioned our right to kneel during the flag, correct?
Yes.
Okay, what about everyone else who is offended by it?
When I mentioned our right to kneel during the national anthem, it was under the premise that we understand our freedoms and we can exercise them. And part of our freedom is, part of our freedoms under that are the freedom of speech. So kneeling during the national anthem would be us exercising that freedom.
So when you mention that, it's only the people who kneel that know their constitutional rights, correct?
Not necessarily. Everyone watching may know the freedoms as well. They just choose not to kneel.
Okay. You also mentioned that students at Otterbein do community engagements, correct?
Yes.
Do you know how many students participate in community engagements?
I do not.
Okay, that's it. Thank you. Yes, citizens have a right not to vote, but as a citizen, they should vote. If they don't, it becomes an issue to our democracy. The fact that voting is an essence of being a citizen, so choosing not to is refusing to take the responsibility of a citizen. Citizens need to vote to be good citizens. States are the ones who register their citizens to vote, yet they do not register everyone. Minorities like blacks and Hispanics are being denied their right to vote. So what does that say about our leaders? That they're taking the rights away from the public and not being good citizens. There has been a huge commotion about the NFL players kneeling during the flag. They know their constitutional rights, but the rest of the country does not. All of the negative publicity that they have received from the media and the rest of the country is a disgrace because the NFL players are expressing their First Amendment right But why is kneeling a huge deal? Because only 37% of Americans know their rights to the First Amendment. So I repeat my point on Americans not learning how to be citizens, which is why I propose there to be a gen ed requirement at Otterbein to help further educate the students here and better prepare them for the real world. And most importantly, educate them more on how to be a well-rounded citizen. According to Forbes magazine, citizens don't pay income tax. That is 77.5 million or 45.3% of citizens who do not pay. They are not contributing to the well-being of the country, meaning that they are not learning how to be good citizens. Not everyone chooses to take specific INSU requirements, which is why I propose for it to be a gen ed requirement, so that we as students know and actually learn how to be good citizens. Thank you.
I would say that knowing how to be a citizen is more than knowing the laws of the land. It means understanding your freedom and rights and taking an active role in your community. Taking an active role can mean many things. It could mean voting, participating in community service, paying taxes, supporting local businesses, and even educating yourself. This means there's more than one way to be a citizen. Knowing your freedoms and rights can be done through participating in all of these activities and also through exercising your freedoms under the Constitution, like kneeling during the national anthem. I would also like to point out that yes, military numbers have fallen, but our military in the U.S. is more diverse than ever. And also, according to Pew Research Center, overseas military presence by the U.S. is at its smallest amount in decades. Participation in the military may have dipped, but the need for deployed troops have dipped as well. Otterbein University takes steps to teach students how to become citizens, even though the higher education institutions are not required to provide civic education under the Education for Democracy Act. This is shown in our institution's thorough INST curriculum, and like I said, many current events are discussed in INST courses. This is also shown through a large involvement in social justice organizations on campus and student government. Finally, we have a department on campus titled the Department of Social Justice and Activism, which exists solely to promote healthy debate and conversation on current controversial topics. If that's not learning to be citizens, I'm not sure what is. Finally, Otterbein students donate 70,000 hours of community service a year, which is a point that I continue going back to because it's a large number for a small university. Like I said before, we as an institution were on the National Honor Roll for the amount of community service hours each student donates a year. Students here volunteer their free time to feed the homeless or pet shelter dogs. They are able to grow our nation through voluntary acts of kindness in their own community. There's even a community service organization on campus called Rock Your Vote, which helps college students register to vote and find polls on election days, which would also be exercising our freedoms. At the end of the day, being a citizen means different things to different people. I personally believe that I am a citizen based strictly on my democratic and social participation. I vote, I donate food and clothes, I pay taxes, and I am educating myself so I can continue to serve my country as a citizen, in whatever way that means to me. So yes, I believe that we are learning to be citizens.
Jude Jude mentions that knowing how to be a citizen is more than knowing the laws of the land and understanding our freedoms. But we don't know either, neither the laws of the land nor our basic freedoms. Again, according to CNN Politics, only 37% of Americans cannot name a single right of the First Amendment, which is freedom of press, religion, petition, speech, and assembly, which are both our rights and the law. She mentions the NFL football players that are kneeling during the flag, which they are exercising their right, but everyone who is offended by it does not know that it is part of the First Amendment rights. Otterbein does not fulfill its mission statement, which is why I propose to have a general education requirement that educates the students on how to become better citizens. Jude also mentions that she pays taxes, but then again, 77.5 million or 45.3% of citizens do not pay income tax. So really, how many people living in the United States actually know how to be true citizens? We are not learning how to be good citizens, but we can start now. We can start here, and we could start with my plan, with the general ed requirement. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, debaters. That was a very difficult question to answer, I think, and I think they did a wonderful job. If we could have another round of applause. I also want to thank TNC Media for covering the Otterbein debates, and it certainly is, I think, something that we look forward to every semester. Judges, do you have a decision? If you would hold up a card for us as to whether or not you feel yes or no. Are we learning? Yeah. And we have a 5-0 decision of yes, we are learning. So, very good. Thank you for watching, and join us next semester when we do more Otterbein debates.